The morning Stephen Halley decided to stop Amara Cole changed everything, not just for him, but for an entire nation watching. What started as a racist cop harassing a black woman in Northwind's whitest neighborhood became the moment America couldn't look away from. He expected submission. She gave him silence that spoke louder than any protest. Before you click away, know this: by the end of this story, you'll understand why thousands now stand in quiet circles across the country. Comment your city below. Let's see how far Amara's legacy has spread. The sun had barely crested over the manicured lawns of Northwind's Willowbrook district when Officer Stephen Halley first spotted her. 6:15 on a Tuesday morning, the golden hour painting everything in deceptive warmth, the kind of light that made even prejudice look softer than it was. Amara Cole walked with purpose down Magnolia Avenue, her military-issue backpack secure on her shoulders, her stride measured and deliberate. She'd learned long ago that the way you move through space could mean the difference between life and death. In Kandahar, it had been about avoiding IEDs. Here in Northwind, it was about something else entirely, something that shouldn't have been dangerous, but somehow always was. "Hey." Halley's voice cracked across the morning stillness like a whip. "You there! Stop!" Amara's shoulders didn't tense. Her pace didn't quicken. She simply stopped, turned slowly, and faced him with the kind of calm that comes from having stared down far worse things than a small-town cop with a power complex. Officer Stephen Halley was 34 years old, had been on the force for 8 years, and had never once questioned whether his instincts about suspicious individuals might be less about instinct and more about the color of their skin. To him, a black woman in Willowbrook at dawn wasn't a resident, wasn't a jogger, wasn't someone with every right to be there. She was an anomaly that needed correcting. "Morning, officer," Amara said, her voice carrying neither fear nor defiance, just acknowledgement. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Halley's hand rested on his belt, not quite on his weapon, but close enough to send a message. "Walking." "Walking where?" "Down the street." The simplicity of her answers irritated him. He was used to certain people scrambling to explain themselves, to justify their existence in spaces he'd mentally marked as off-limits. This woman's composure felt like defiance. "You live around here." He stepped closer, his 6'2" frame meant to intimidate. Amara stood 5'8", but something in her posture made the height difference irrelevant. "Is there a problem, officer? I asked you a question. And I'm asking if there's a problem. Am I being detained?" The legal terminology made Halley's jaw clench. He hated when they knew their rights. It made things complicated. "I'm conducting a routine check. This neighborhood's had some break-ins recently." It was a lie. Willowbrook hadn't seen a break-in in 3 years, and even that had been a teenager sneaking back into his own house after curfew. But lies came easy when you wore a badge and assumed no one would check. "I see," Amara said. "And I match the description of your suspect." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Mrs. Patricia Henderson, 73 years old and walking her Pomeranian, stopped on the opposite sidewalk. She'd lived in Willowbrook for 40 years, had seen the neighborhood change, had watched as fear replaced neighborliness. She recognized Amara. The young woman had moved in 3 months ago, bought the old Garrett place on Sycamore. Paid cash too, though Patricia only knew that because her daughter worked at the real estate office. "Everything all right here?" Patricia called out, her voice carrying the authority of age and concern. Halley turned annoyed. "Ma'am, please keep walking. This is a police matter." But Patricia didn't keep walking. Instead, she pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages while actually opening her camera app. She'd seen enough news stories to know how these situations could escalate. "I need to see some ID," Halley said, turning back to Amara. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I'm asking." "That's not how the law works, officer." Amara's tone remained conversational, almost educational. "Unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've am committing, or am about to commit a crime, I'm not required to identify myself." Halley's face flushed red. 8 years on the force, and he'd never had someone, especially not a black woman, speak to him about the law like she was teaching a class. You some kind of lawyer? No. Then how about you stop pretending you know the law better than me? I'm not pretending anything. I'm stating facts. By now, 3 more people had stopped. James Chen, heading out for his morning run, stood by the stop sign, earbuds out, phone subtly recording. Maria Santos, opening up her coffee shop 2 blocks down, had stepped outside, drawn by the raised voices. And Thomas Mitchell, a contractor on his way to an early job, had pulled his truck to the curb, hazards blinking. The audience made Hallie nervous, but it also made him feel like he couldn't back down. In his mind, backing down now would be showing weakness, would be letting them win. Look, he said, trying a different approach. Just show me your ID, prove you live here, and we can both go about our day. Officer Hallie, Amara said, reading his badge. I understand you think you're doing your job, but your job doesn't include harassing citizens without cause. Now, unless you're detaining me, which would require you to articulate a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, I'll be continuing my walk. She turned to leave. Don't you walk away from me. Hallie's voice rose to nearly a shout. His hand moved to his radio. I need backup at Magnolia and 3rd. Uncooperative subject. Amara stopped, turned back slowly. Backup. For what crime? Failure to comply with a lawful order. What lawful order? You haven't given one. You've made requests I'm not legally obligated to fulfill. More phones were out now. The small gathering had grown to about a dozen people, some genuinely concerned, others sensing the kind of confrontation that would make for viral content. But something in the air felt different from typical bystander voyeurism. There was a protective quality to their watching, as if they were forming an invisible barrier around Amara. That backpack, Hallie said, grasping for something, anything to justify escalation. What's in it? My belongings. I need to search it. No. Excuse me? I said no. The 4th Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. You have no warrant, no probable cause, and I don't consent to a search. Hallie stepped closer, close enough that Amara could smell the coffee on his breath, see the small scar above his left eyebrow, notice the way his pupils dilated with adrenaline and anger. You know what I think, he said, voice low and threatening. I think you're one of those troublemakers. Come into nice neighborhoods. Case houses act all innocent when caught. What you think, Amara replied, matching his volume, but not his hostility, is irrelevant without evidence. And Officer Hallie, you're standing awfully close for someone who's supposed to be conducting a professional interaction. She didn't step back. Stepping back would imply she was intimidated, would give him the psychological victory he was seeking. Instead, she maintained eye contact, her breathing steady, her body relaxed but ready. Years of SEAL training had taught her to recognize threats, to calculate distances and reaction times, to know exactly how many moves it would take to neutralize an opponent. The math was automatic now. Grab, wrist twist. Leverage, weight control, weapon subdue. 3 seconds. Maybe 4, if he resisted effectively. But she wouldn't. Not unless forced. Violence was always the last option, despite what Hollywood claimed about Special Forces operators. Ryan, you getting this? Someone in the crowd whispered. Every second, came the reply. Hallie heard the exchange, realized he was being filmed from multiple angles. Part of him, the rational part that occasionally surfaced, suggested de-escalation. But the larger part, the part that had been carefully cultivated by years of warrior training seminars and us versus them mentality, saw de-escalation as defeat. Turn around, he ordered. No. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. For what purpose? For a pat-down. Based on what reasonable suspicion? Based on you being uncooperative and suspicious. Amara almost smiled at the circular logic. Being uncooperative with unlawful demands isn't illegal, officer, and suspicious isn't a crime. If it were, half of Congress would be in jail. Someone in the crowd actually laughed, a nervous, surprised sound that seemed to break something in Hallie's composure. "That's it," he said, reaching for her arm. Amara moved not aggressively, just efficiently, stepping back and to the side, keeping her hands visible but out of reach. "Officer Hallie, touching me without cause constitutes assault. I encourage you to reconsider. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the law. There's a difference." The sound of sirens grew closer. Hallie's backup was arriving, which meant this situation was about to either de-escalate through superior intervention or escalate through pack mentality. Amara had seen both happen, knew the odds were rarely in favor of the former. A patrol car pulled up, and Officer Janet Rodriguez stepped out. Hallie had expected Mike Brennan, who would have backed him without question. Rodriguez was different, newer to the force, less invested in the thin blue line mythology, more interested in actual law enforcement than power trips. "What's the situation?" Rodriguez asked, taking in the scene, the crowd, the phones, Hallie's aggressive stance, Amara's controlled calm. "Suspicious individual refusing to identify, being uncooperative." Hallie rattled off. Rodriguez looked at Amara. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The simple question, "Are you okay?" shifted something in the dynamic. It acknowledged Amara as a person, not just a problem to be solved. "I'm fine, officer. I was taking a walk when Officer Hallie stopped me without cause. I've been explaining that I'm under no legal obligation to provide ID or submit to a search without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity." Rodriguez nodded slowly, then turned to Hallie. "What's the reasonable suspicion?" She was walking this neighborhood. "That's not suspicious, Stephen. Walking while black isn't a crime." The directness of it from another officer made several people in the crowd gasp. Hallie's face went from red to purple. "You don't know the situation, Janet. I know enough. Ma'am, you're free to go." But Hallie couldn't let it go. As Amara turned to leave, he grabbed her backpack, yanking her backward. The move was sudden, violent, unexpected. Amara's training kicked in automatically. She rolled with the pull, used his momentum against him, and in a motion too fast for most to follow, she had spun, dropped her weight, and swept his leg. Hallie went down hard. For a moment, nobody moved. Hallie was on the ground. Amara was standing over him, and the entire street held its breath. "I'm sorry," Amara said immediately, hands up, stepping back. "That was reflexive. He grabbed me and..." Hallie rolled, pulled his weapon. "Get on the ground now." "Stephen!" "No!" Rodriguez shouted, but Hallie was beyond hearing. Amara dropped to her knees, hands still up. She'd been in this position before, but usually in training scenarios. The key was to remain calm, to not give them an excuse. Even when every instinct screamed to defend herself, to use the dozens of techniques she knew to disarm and neutralize, she knelt. Face down now. She complied, pressing her cheek against the cold asphalt, spreading her arms wide. The position was humiliating by design, meant to establish dominance, to break spirit. But Amara had been waterboarded in CRA training, had endured psychological operations designed by the best in the business. A power-tripping cop couldn't break what the United States military had forged. Stephen put the weapon away. Rodriguez ordered, her own hand moving to her sidearm, not to draw, but to be ready. "She's complying." "She assaulted an officer. You grabbed her first. Everyone saw it." The crowd was no longer quiet. Voices rose in anger, in disbelief, in documentation. "He grabbed her. She was just defending herself. This is insane. Someone call the chief. I've got it all on video." Hallie moved forward, knee dropping toward Amara's back, but she rolled at the last second, his knee hitting pavement instead of spine. The move was subtle enough that it looked like she'd simply shifted in fear, but Rodriguez caught it, the precision, the timing. This woman had training. "Stay still," Hallie shouted, grabbing for his cuffs. "Officer Hallie," Amara said, voice calm despite her position. "I am not resisting. I am complying with all lawful orders. Officer Rodriguez, I request your supervision of this arrest to ensure it's conducted properly." It was brilliant, Rodriguez realized. By specifically requesting her oversight, Amara was creating a paper trail making Rodriguez legally responsible for ensuring proper procedure. It would all go in the report. Hallie got the cuffs on too tight, of course the metal biting into Amara's wrists. As he pulled her to her feet, he made sure to be rough to assert what control he could. But Amara didn't give him the satisfaction of a wince. "You're under arrest for assaulting a police officer," he said. "I understand. I'm invoking my right to remain silent and requesting an attorney." "Shut up." "Officer Rodriguez, please note that I've invoked my rights." Rodriguez nodded, pulling out her notepad. "Noted. Time is 6:47 a.m. As Hallie marched Amara toward his patrol car, something in his peripheral vision made him pause. An elderly black man had joined the crowd, wearing a Marine's cap, standing at perfect attention. Then, another veteran appeared, this one in an army jacket, assuming the same position. Then another, and another. Within minutes, 7 veterans stood in silent formation saluting. "What the hell is this?" Hallie muttered. The Marine veteran spoke, his voice carrying the gravitas of age and experience. "That's Lieutenant Commander Amara Cole, you ignorant fool. Navy SEAL Team 4. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart twice over." The silence that followed was deafening. Hallie's hand loosened on Amara's arm. That's not... My daughter served with her in Kandahar." Another voice called out Patricia Henderson, the elderly woman with the Pomeranian. Said Commander Cole saved her entire unit from an ambush, carried 2 wounded Marines half a mile under fire. "This is who you're arresting." The Marine veteran stepped forward. "This woman has more courage in her fingernail than you have in your entire body." Rodriguez was already on her radio. "Dispatch, we need a supervisor at Magnolia and 3rd immediately. High priority." "I don't care who she is," Hallie said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "She assaulted an officer." "After you assaulted her," someone called out. "While she was walking in her own neighborhood," another added. "The neighborhood where she bought a house with money she earned defending your right to be a racist prick." The Marine veteran said, his voice sharp as a blade. Amara finally spoke. "Sergeant Major, I appreciate it, but with all due respect, Commander, shut up and let us handle this." It was an order delivered with affection and respect. Amara actually smiled. More sirens approached. This time, it wasn't just patrol cars. Local news vans were already en route, alerted by the multiple social media posts gaining traction. Hatch walking. While Black was trending locally, about to go national. Chief Patricia Williams arrived in her personal vehicle, having been called directly by someone with enough pull to have her private number. She took in the scene, Hallie with a cuffed black woman, Rodriguez looking professionally mortified, a crowd of increasingly angry citizens, multiple recording devices, and veterans standing at attention. "Officers, what exactly is happening here?" Hallie started to speak, but Williams held up a hand. "Officer Rodriguez, you report." Rodriguez laid out the facts clinically, professionally, without editorializing, but also without omitting Hallie's aggression or Amara's legal knowledge. When she mentioned that the arrestee was apparently a decorated Navy SEAL, Williams's expression shifted from concerned to alarmed. "Uncuff her, now." "But Chief," Hallie protested. "Officer Hallie, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. Hand over your badge and weapon to Officer Rodriguez." "You can't." "I can and I am. Badge and weapon now." The crowd erupted in approval, but Amara raised her freed hands for quiet. They gave it to her immediately, the kind of respect earned rather than demanded. "Chief Williams," Amara said, rubbing her wrists where the cuffs had left marks. "I appreciate your intervention, but this isn't just about me. How many times has Officer Hallie done this when there weren't cameras, when there wasn't a crowd, when the person didn't know their rights or have military credentials to make them worthy of respect?" Williams looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past 5 minutes. "You're right. This will be thoroughly investigated." "Will it? Or will he get a few weeks paid leave and come back to do it again? The question hung in the air unanswered, because everyone knew the typical answer. I'll be filing a formal complaint, Amara continued. I'll be requesting all body camera footage, patrol car video, and Officer Halley's disciplinary record. I know you can't release all of it, but I also know what you can release, and I'll be making sure the public sees it. That's your right, Williams said carefully. Yes, it is. Just like walking through my neighborhood was my right. A news crew had arrived, setting up quickly. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Chen, approached carefully. Excuse me, are you Amara Cole, the Navy SEAL? Amara considered for a moment, then nodded. Former Navy SEAL. Now I'm just a citizen who wanted to take a morning walk. Can you tell us what happened? A police officer stopped me without cause, attempted to violate my Fourth Amendment rights, assaulted me when I legally refused, and then arrested me for defending myself. If it wasn't for Officer Rodriguez's professionalism and these witnesses, I'd probably be in a holding cell right now facing fabricated charges. Officer Halley, do you have a comment? Jessica turned to where Halley stood, badge and gun surrendered, looking smaller somehow. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. This is the problem, Amara said, addressing the camera directly now. It's not just about bad apples. It's about a system that protects those bad apples, that moves them from precinct to precinct, that pays them while they're investigated, and then puts them back on the street. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, fought for this country, bled for it. But somehow walking through my own neighborhood while black is still seen as a threat. The Marine veteran stepped forward. Ma'am, would you permit us to escort you home? Amara looked at the growing group of veterans, all standing ready. That's kind of you, but I need to finish my walk. That's what this was about, my right to walk freely. If I go home now, he wins. Then we'll walk with you. Patricia Henderson said, her Pomeranian yapping agreement. All of us, Maria Santos added. What happened next would be talked about for years in Northwind. Amara Cole resumed her morning walk, but now she was accompanied by dozens of people. Veterans, shop owners, teenagers with skateboards, elderly women with small dogs, contractors in work boots, runners in athletic gear, all walking together down Magnolia Avenue as the sun climbed higher. They walked in silence at first, but then someone started humming. It was an old hymn, one that had been sung during civil rights marches decades before. Others joined in harmonies, building naturally until the street filled with quiet song. Halley stood by his patrol car watching them go. Rodriguez stood nearby, making sure he didn't do anything else stupid. You know she could have killed me, Halley said suddenly. When I grabbed her, when she threw me down, someone with that training, she could have killed me in seconds. But she didn't, Rodriguez replied. She showed more restraint than you did. You were just what, Stephen? Protecting the neighborhood from a decorated veteran who lives here? Or were you just being exactly what everyone's saying you are? Halley had no answer. The walking group had grown to nearly 100 people by the time they reached Sycamore Street, where Amara's house stood, a modest, two-story colonial she'd bought with cash, painted a soft blue with white trim. She'd replaced the front door herself. Installed security cameras, not because the neighborhood was dangerous, but because she knew what could happen when you looked like she did in a place like this. Thank you, she said to the crowd. All of you. But I need you to understand something. This isn't over. Officer Halley will likely face minimal consequences. The system will protect him because that's what it does. The only thing that saved me today was you. Your cameras, your voices, your presence. We have to keep being present for each other. What can we do? Someone asked. Show up, Amara said simply. When you see something like this happening, don't walk by. Stop, record, bear witness. Form a circle if you have to, a quiet circle of presence that says, we see you, we're here, you're not alone. It doesn't have to be confrontational. Sometimes just standing there, being seen, seeing, is enough to change the dynamic. The quiet circle, Patricia Henderson said thoughtfully. I like that. The phrase would catch on, spreading beyond Northwind within days. Videos of groups of people silently surrounding police stops not interfering, but witnessing would become common. The quiet circle. A form of protest that was perfectly legal, completely peaceful, and remarkably effective. But that was still to come. For now, Amara stood on her lawn looking at the assembled crowd. "I'm going to make coffee," she announced. "My house isn't big enough for everyone, but I've got a decent backyard. Anyone who wants to continue this conversation is welcome." For the next 3 hours, Amara's backyard became an impromptu town hall. Stories were shared, other encounters with Hallie, other moments of fear and frustration. Other instances where people wished they'd spoken up, but hadn't. The Marine veteran, whose name was William Thompson, talked about coming home from Vietnam to find that his uniform meant nothing if his skin was the wrong color. Maria Santos shared her experience of being followed through grocery stores, treated like a thief despite being a business owner. James Chen discussed being told to go back to China, despite being third-generation American. Jessica Chen and her news crew captured portions of it, but mostly they just listened. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was about patterns, systems, cultures that needed changing. Chief Williams arrived around 9 out of uniform, looking uncomfortable but determined. "May I join you?" Amara gestured to an empty chair. "Coffee's in the kitchen." What Williams heard over the next hour would later be described as the most important education of her career. Not the policies and procedures taught at the academy, not the management theories from leadership seminars, but real voices describing real experiences in the community she'd sworn to protect and serve. "We need to do better," Williams said finally. "I need to do better." "Acknowledgement is a start," Amara replied. "But what comes next matters more. What would you suggest?" "Complete transparency about Hallie's record. Mandatory retraining for all officers on constitutional rights and de-escalation. Community oversight with actual power, not just advisory capacity. And accountability, real accountability, not just shuffling problem officers around." "That's a lot of change." "Yes, it is. Question is, Chief, are you willing to fight for it? Because there will be pushback. The union will resist. Officers like Hallie will claim you're betraying them. Politicians will worry about looking soft on crime or anti-police. Are you ready for that?" Williams was quiet for a long moment. "Can I be honest? I don't know. But I know I have to try. What happened this morning? If you hadn't been who you are, if the crowd hadn't formed, if Rodriguez hadn't been there, I'd be in jail on false charges," Amara finished. "Or worse." "Or worse," Williams agreed quietly. By noon, the story had gone national. The quiet circle was trending globally. Videos from multiple angles showed the entire encounter from Hallie's initial stop to the community walk. Military organizations were weighing in, expressing outrage that a decorated veteran had been treated this way. Civil rights organizations were mobilizing, seeing in Amara's calm resistance a model for dealing with police encounters. But Amara herself had disappeared from the public eye. After the gathering in her backyard dispersed, she'd politely declined all interview requests, turned off her phone, and gone for a run, a real one this time, through the trails behind Northwind, where she could move without being seen, where she could process what had happened. The trail wound through old-growth forest, the kind of place that had stood long before Northwind existed, would stand long after it was gone. Amara ran with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to cover ground in full combat gear, her breathing steady, her mind finally quiet. She thought about Afghanistan, about the village elder who'd told her once that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to stand anyway. She thought about her SEAL training, about the instructors who'd pushed her past every limit she thought she had, not to make her cruel, but to make her capable of protecting others. She thought about her grandmother, who'd lived through Jim Crow, who'd told her stories of dignity maintained in the face of systematic humiliation. All of it had led to this morning, to that moment of decision when Hallie grabbed her. She could have complied, could have shown her ID, could have made it easy. But easy compliance with injustice wasn't what she'd been trained for, wasn't what she'd bled for, wasn't what those who came before her had endured for. The path curved, revealing a vista of Northwind spread below. From up here, it looked peaceful, even idyllic. Red roofs and green lawns, the American dream in architectural form. But dreams and reality were different things, and the reality was that she'd had to fight for her right to walk through those streets. Her phone tucked in her running belt buzzed insistently, despite being on silent. She ignored it. The world wanted her story, wanted to make her a symbol, a spokesperson, a hero, or a victim depending on their agenda. But she was none of those things, or maybe all of them. She was just a woman who'd wanted to take a walk. When she finally returned home, there were news vans on her street, reporters on her lawn. Her neighbors had formed a protective barrier keeping the media at bay. "The commander doesn't want to talk to you," William Thompson was saying firmly. "When and if she does, she'll let you know." "The public has a right to know," one reporter started. "The public has a right to accurate information, not harassment." Patricia Henderson interrupted. "Now get off her lawn before we call the real police officer Rodriguez, not the other kind." Amara slipped through her back gate unseen. Inside, she found her living room full of flowers deliveries that her neighbors had accepted on her behalf. The cards were from veterans organizations, civil rights groups, and individuals who'd seen the video. One caught her eye, hand-delivered, according to the note from a group of young black girls at the local elementary school. "Thank you for standing up. Now we know we can too." That one she kept. The rest she would donate to the hospital. As afternoon faded into evening, Amara sat on her back porch watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Her phone had logged over 200 missed calls, 1,000 text messages, and enough emails to crash a lesser server. She'd deal with them tomorrow, or maybe the day after. For now, she just sat, breathed, existed in her space without apology or explanation. Rodriguez arrived as darkness fell out of uniform, looking exhausted. "Mind if I sit?" Amara gestured to the chair beside her. They sat in silence for a while, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Hallie's been fired," Rodriguez finally said. "Effective immediately. The union's fighting it, but with the video evidence and witness statements, they don't have much ground. He'll get hired somewhere else. Maybe. But his name's out there now. Any department that takes him knows what they're getting. And what about you? There'll be blowback for not supporting him." Rodriguez shrugged. "Let them come. I became a cop to protect people, not to protect bad cops. If they want to make my life difficult for that, then maybe I'm in the wrong profession. Or maybe you're exactly what the profession needs." They sat quietly again, the night sounds of suburbia surrounding them. Sprinklers, activating dogs, barking television, laughter from open windows. "Can I ask you something?" Rodriguez said. "When he grabbed you when you threw him, that was training, right? Military training. Muscle memory. Years of it. You could have hurt him badly." "Yes." "But you didn't." "No." "Why not?" Amara considered the question. Because violence is what he expected, what he maybe even wanted. It would have justified everything in his mind, made him the victim. But mostly because that's not who I am. I've done violence when necessary, when lives depended on it. But a racist cop on a power trip, he's not worth compromising who I am. He could have killed you. Yes. That doesn't scare you. Of course it does. But I learned a long time ago that there are things worse than dying. Living on your knees is one of them. Rodriguez absorbed this, nodding slowly. What happens now? Now we see if anything really changes, or if this is just another viral moment that fades. Now we see if Chief Williams means what she says. Now we see if Northwind wants to be better, or just wants to look better. And you. I'm going to keep walking through my neighborhood. Every morning, same route, same time. And if someone wants to stop me again, they'll have to do it in front of the whole world. Over the following days, Amara's morning walks became events. The first day after the incident, 30 people joined her. The second day, 50. By the end of the week, hundreds were walking through Willowbrook at dawn, a silent procession of witness and solidarity. Hallie tried to speak to the media to give his side, but even sympathetic outlets struggled to spin the video evidence. His claim that he'd felt threatened by a woman he outweighed by 50 pounds fell flat. His assertion that she'd been aggressive was contradicted by her calm demeanor throughout the encounter. His argument that he was just doing his job was undermined by Rodriguez's testimony that he'd violated multiple procedures. Within a month, he'd left Northwind entirely, moving to another state where his notoriety might fade. But the internet never forgets, and every department he applied to received copies of the video transcripts of the witness statements and documentation of his record. Chief Williams, true to her word, implemented sweeping changes. Body cameras became mandatory and couldn't be turned off during any public interaction. A civilian oversight board was created with actual power to recommend termination. De-escalation training became monthly instead of annual, and every officer was required to attend community meetings, not to speak, but to listen. The quiet circle spread beyond Northwind. In Chicago, a group surrounded a traffic stop that was escalating their silent presence, diffusing the situation. In Atlanta, citizens formed circles around homeless individuals being harassed. In Seattle, the circle protected protesters from aggressive enforcement. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. There were still bad stops, still abuse of power, still those who saw a badge as a license to dominate rather than serve. But something had shifted. The watchers were being watched, and they knew it. 3 months after the incident, Amara received a call from the Pentagon. They wanted her to speak at the Naval Academy about leadership, about moral courage, about standing up for principles, especially when it was difficult. She declined. "I'm not a symbol," she told them. "I'm not a spokesperson. I'm just someone who wanted to take a walk." But symbols aren't chosen. They're made by moments and responses to those moments. Despite her reluctance, Amara Cole had become something more than herself. She'd become proof that dignity could be maintained in the face of indignity, that calm resistance could be more powerful than violent response, that sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply refusing to bow. The morning walks continued. Rain or shine. Amara Cole walked through Willowbrook at dawn. Sometimes alone, sometimes with hundreds, always with the knowledge that she'd earned the right to be there. Not through her service, not through her decorations, not through her training, but simply by existing as a human being, deserving of respect. On the 6-month anniversary of the incident, a small memorial appeared at the corner of Magnolia and 3rd. No one knew who'd placed it, a simple bronze plaque embedded in the sidewalk. It read, "On this spot, a community chose to stand together. The quiet circle began here." Amara saw it on her morning walk, stopped, read it, and continued on without comment. But those watching, and there were always those watching now, saw her touch it briefly, a gesture so quick it might have been imagined. Later that day, a reporter managed to get a question to her as she left the grocery store. "Commander Cole, what do you think about the memorial?" She paused, considered, then spoke. "It's not about me, it never was. It's about everyone who stood there that day. Everyone who stood since, everyone who will stand tomorrow. The memorial isn't for what happened, it's for what's happening, what needs to keep happening." Do you think things have really changed? Ask me in 10 years. Real change doesn't happen in months or years, it happens in generations. But someone has to be the generation that starts it. And you think this generation is it? Amara looked at the reporter, really looked at her, young Ernest, carrying her own experiences and hopes. "I think this generation is tired of waiting for permission to create the world they want to live in. The quiet circle isn't about confrontation, it's about presence. It's about saying, we're here, we see, we remember. That's powerful. That's change." One last question: do you regret anything about that morning? No. Not even the parts that hurt. Because that morning wasn't just about me walking through my neighborhood. It was about my grandmother walking through hers when signs said she couldn't. It was about my mother walking through hers when custom said she shouldn't. It was about my niece walking through hers without having to fight for the right. That morning was bigger than me. Bigger than Officer Hallie. Bigger than Northwind. It was about deciding what kind of country we want to be. The reporter thanked her and left. Amara loaded her groceries into her car, the same practical sedan she'd driven for years. Nothing fancy. Nothing that screamed hero or victim, or any other label the world wanted to stick on her. As she drove home through the streets of Willowbrook, she passed the corner where it had all happened. A small group stood there as they did every day now, maintaining vigil. Not protesting, just standing, witnessing, making sure that corner would never again be a place where someone was stopped for the crime of existing while black. She didn't wave, didn't acknowledge them directly. But she saw them, and they saw her. And in that seeing was a kind of promise that the watching would continue, that the circle would hold, that the quiet would speak louder than any shout. That night, Amara sat in her backyard again, as had become her habit. The stars were particularly bright, the air crisp with approaching autumn. Her phone sat silent beside her, the world's demands temporarily muted. Tomorrow she would walk again as she had every morning since moving to Northwind. Maybe alone, maybe with others, but always with purpose. Not the purpose of proving anything or fighting anyone, but the simple purpose of existing freely in space, of claiming the right that should never have been questioned. The night sounds rose around her, crickets, distant trains, the hum of suburban life, continuing its ancient rhythms. Somewhere in the darkness, a night bird called its voice, cutting through the ambient noise with startling clarity. Amara smiled, recognizing the call. It was a whip-poor-will, rare in these parts, a bird that sang its own name over and over until everyone knew exactly what it was. No apologies, no explanations, just pure declaration of self. She listened to it sing, this small, fierce thing, claiming its space in the darkness, and thought about courage. Not the dramatic courage of battlefields and medals, but the quiet courage of daily persistence, of refusing to be erased or diminished, of walking through the world, as if you belonged, because you did. The whip-poor-will's call had barely faded when Amara's phone lit up with an urgent text from Rodriguez. "Check Channel 7, now." Inside the television showed a breaking news segment. Another incident, this time in Chicago. A young black teenager, Marcus Williams, had been stopped, beaten, and arrested for matching a description. The body cam footage leaked by an anonymous source within the department was brutal. But what happened next was why Rodriguez had texted as the officers tried to drag Marcus to their patrol car. A circle formed. Silent witnesses' phones raised, standing close enough to be seen, but not close enough to interfere. The quiet circle had spread far beyond Northwind. The news anchor was speaking to a civil rights attorney. This is the 15th documented quiet circle intervention this month. Police unions are calling it organized interference, but legal experts say... Amara turned off the television. She didn't need experts to explain what was happening. People were finding their courage not in confrontation, but in presence. The revolution wasn't being televised, it was being live-streamed by ordinary citizens who'd decided that looking away was no longer an option. Her doorbell rang at 10:30 late for Northwind Suburbia. Through the peephole, she saw Chief Williams in civilian clothes, looking haggard. "We need to talk," Williams said when Amara opened the door. About Stephen Hallie. He's dead." The words hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Amara stepped aside, letting Williams enter. They sat in the living room, the chief declining the offered coffee with a wave that suggested she'd had too much already. "When?" Amara asked. 3 hours ago. Self-inflicted gunshot. His landlord in Arkansas found him." Amara was quiet for a moment, processing. She felt no satisfaction, no vindication, just a hollow sadness for the waste of it all, his life. His potential to change the pain he'd caused and the pain that had driven him to this end. "He left a note," Williams continued, pulling out her phone to read from a screenshot. "I won't read all of it, but he mentioned you." Said you were right that he'd become something he never meant to be. Said the uniform had changed him, or maybe revealed him. He couldn't live with either possibility. I never wanted this, Amara said quietly. I know, but I thought you should hear it from me before the media gets hold of it. They'll try to make this part of your story somehow either paint you as the hero who exposed him or the villain who drove him to it. I'm neither. No, you're not. But that won't stop them from trying. Williams stood to leave, then paused at the door. There's something else. Internal Affairs finished their investigation. Hallie had 43 complaints over 8 years, 43. All but 2 were from Black or Hispanic citizens. All but 5 were dismissed as unfounded or lacking evidence. The system didn't just fail, it enabled. After Williams left, Amara sat in darkness for a long time. She thought about how he wondered what had broken inside him to make him see threat in the mere existence of others. She wondered if he'd always been that way, or if something had shaped him, molded him into a weapon pointed at his own community. By morning, the news had broken. Protesters gathered at the Northwind Police Department, but their anger seemed muted by complexity. How do you protest a dead man? How do you demand justice from a ghost? Amara's morning walk drew more attention than usual. Reporters shouted questions that she didn't answer. Someone had placed flowers at the memorial on Magnolia and 3rd not for Hallie, but for what his death represented, a system so broken that even those who perpetuated it could be crushed by its weight. William Thompson joined her at Sycamore, falling into step without speaking. They'd walked 2 blocks before he said, "My nephew was stopped by Hallie 3 years ago. Kid was walking home from basketball practice. Hallie made him lie face down in the mud for 20 minutes while he verified that the ball he was carrying was really his." What happened? Nothing. We filed a complaint. Got a letter 2 months later saying the investigation found no wrongdoing. My nephew quit basketball. Started taking the long way home to avoid that street. 16 years old and already learning to make himself smaller to survive. They walked in silence until they reached the park at the center of Willowbrook, where a small crowd had gathered. Someone had organized a vigil, not for Hallie exactly, but for everyone caught in the machinery of systemic failure. A young woman stood at the makeshift podium, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. We're not here to celebrate anyone's death. We're here to acknowledge that the system that created Officer Hallie, that protected him, that enabled him, is still operating. His death doesn't change that. If anything, it shows how that system ultimately serves no one, not even those who think they benefit from it. Amara recognized her Jasmine Porter, a senior at the local high school, who'd organized several peaceful protests over the past months. The girl had a gift for cutting through to truth. "Commander Cole?" Jasmine called out, spotting Amara in the crowd. "Would you like to speak?" Amara shook her head, but the crowd began urging her forward. Reluctantly, she approached the podium. "I don't have a speech prepared." She began, her voice carrying, despite her reluctance. "I woke up this morning the same way I did 6 months ago, as a person who wanted to walk freely through her neighborhood. Stephen Hallie's death doesn't change that. It doesn't vindicate me or invalidate what happened. It just adds another layer of tragedy to an already tragic situation." She paused, looking out at the faces, young and old, various shades and backgrounds, all searching for meaning in the meaninglessness. "People keep calling me a hero, but heroes are for stories. This isn't a story. It's life, messy and complicated and without clear endings. Hallie wasn't a monster. He was a man who made monstrous choices. The system that enabled him isn't evil, it's broken. And broken things can be fixed, but only if we stop pretending they're working." Someone in the crowd called out, "How do we fix it?" "By not giving up," Amara replied. "By continuing to show up, to witness, to demand better. By teaching our children that authority without accountability is tyranny, whether it wears a badge or a suit. By refusing to let fear make us silent or anger make us cruel." She stepped back from the podium, but Jasmine caught her arm gently. "There's something else. We've been organizing, not just here, but nationally. The Quiet Circle Alliance. Non-violent, non-confrontational, but present. Always present. We want you to be part of it. I'm not an organizer, Amara said. You don't have to be. Just be yourself. That morning when you stood your ground without violence, without hatred, just dignity, that taught us more than any speech could. Before Amara could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. A group of counter-protesters had arrived carrying "Blue Lives Matter" signs and chanting about supporting police. The tension immediately ratcheted up, the two groups facing each other across 20 feet of grass that suddenly seemed like a chasm. One of the counter-protesters, a middle-aged white man in a "Support Our Officers" t-shirt, pushed to the front. "You people celebrating a good cop's death, shame on you." "Nobody's celebrating," Jasmine said into the microphone. "We're mourning all the victims of a broken system, including Officer Hallie." "He wasn't a victim, he was a hero," the man shouted. "Keeping our streets safe from—" He stopped, but everyone heard the unfinished sentence. "From people like me?" Amara asked, stepping forward. She didn't take the microphone, didn't raise her voice, but somehow everyone heard her. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq. I've kept more streets safe than Officer Hallie ever did." "So what exactly was he keeping you safe from?" The man's face reddened. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. And that's okay. At least you're honest about it. Officer Hallie saw me as a threat because of how I look, not what I did. You see me the same way. The difference is, you're not carrying a badge and a gun." Hallie was doing his job. No, he wasn't. Officer Rodriguez was doing her job protecting and serving. Chief Williams is doing her job trying to fix a broken department. The officers who've reached out to apologize for Hallie, who've committed to being better, they're doing their job. Hallie was doing something else, something that ultimately destroyed him. The counter-protester group seemed unsure how to respond to Amara's calm directness. Their chants faltered, their signs drooped. One woman among them, older, wearing a police widow's pin, stepped forward. "My husband was killed in the line of duty 15 years ago," she said. "He was a good man, a good cop. It feels like you're saying he wasn't." Amara walked over to her close enough to speak privately, but still audible to those nearby. "What was his name?" Daniel Morrison. Officer Daniel Morrison died responding to a domestic violence call. He put himself between a woman and her armed ex-husband, took 3 bullets meant for her. She lived because of him. The widow's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Because I make it my business to know the difference between officers like your husband and officers like Stephen Hallie. Your husband died serving and protecting. Hallie died because he couldn't live with who he'd become. Those aren't the same thing, and honoring one doesn't mean honoring the other." The widow began crying, and Amara did something that surprised everyone. She embraced her. The image of a black woman who'd been brutalized by police comforting a white police widow would become one of the most shared photos of the year. "We're not enemies," Amara said loud enough for all to hear. "We're all trapped in the same broken system, just in different ways. The question is whether we're going to keep fighting each other or start fixing what's actually wrong." The counter-protest dissolved, rather than dispersed its members, drifting away in 1s and 2s, some stopping to talk with the vigil attendees, others just leaving quietly. The widow stayed standing next to Amara as Jasmine retook the podium. "This is what we're trying to build," Jasmine said. "Not division, but difficult unity. Not easy answers, but hard questions. The quiet circle isn't about taking sides, it's about creating space for truth." The vigil continued for another hour, but Amara slipped away after 20 minutes. She'd said what needed saying, been seen where she needed to be seen. Now she needed solitude to process it all. She drove to the forest trails parked in the empty lot and ran. 10 miles 15 until her legs burned and her lungs ached and her mind finally quieted. When she stopped standing at the overlook where she could see the city spread below, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Daniel Morrison Jr. My mom gave me your number. Thank you for what you said about my dad. And thank you for seeing the difference. Not everyone does anymore." She texted back, "Your father's sacrifice honored what the badge should mean. That's worth remembering and protecting." 3 dots appeared showing he was typing, then stopped, then started again. Finally, "I'm a cop too. Different city but still. After what happened to you, what happened to Hallie, I don't know if I can keep wearing this uniform." Amara called him instead of texting. He answered on the first ring. "Officer Morrison," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me why you became a cop." There was a pause. "Because of my dad. Because I wanted to be like him." "And are you?" "I try to be, but the job, it changes you. Or maybe it reveals you. I heard Hallie wrote that in his note." "Which do you think it is?" "Both, neither. I don't know anymore." Amara sat on a fallen log, looking out at the city. "I knew soldiers who came back from war broken, and soldiers who came back whole. The difference wasn't what they saw, or did we all saw, and did terrible things. The difference was whether they held on to who they were beneath the uniform." How? By remembering that the uniform serves the person, not the other way around. By having lines you won't cross even when crossing them would be easier. By surrounding yourself with people who'll call you out when you start drifting. Did you ever drift? Once. Kandahar 2011. We'd lost 3 people to an IED, and I wanted someone to pay. Anyone. There was a suspected bomb maker, and I had him in custody. I could have hurt him, could have justified it 6 different ways. Nobody would have questioned it. What stopped you? My sergeant, Maria Rodriguez. Different Rodriguez, funny enough. She looked me in the eye and said, "Cole, is this who you want to be when you take that uniform off?" And I realized that who I was in the uniform would be who I was out of it. They're not separate people. Officer Hallie probably thought they were. Probably. And that thinking killed him as surely as the gun. They talked for another 20 minutes about the job, about fear, about the weight of carrying authority over others' lives. When they hung up, Amara felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Not the naive hope that everything would magically improve, but the practical hope that comes from knowing there are still Officer Morrisons out there trying to be worthy of their badges. The sun was setting by the time she got home. Her street was quiet, the media circus having moved on to fresher tragedies. But on her porch sat a package, no return address, just her name written in careful script. Inside was a medal, Hallie's commendation for bravery, awarded 5 years ago when he'd saved a child from a burning car. The note was from his sister. He wasn't always what he became. This was the brother I want to remember. I thought you should have this to remember, that even broken people can have moments of goodness. Maybe that's all any of us are, moments of goodness trying to outweigh our failures. Amara held the medal, feeling its weight, not just physical, but symbolic. Tomorrow she decided she would visit Hallie's sister. Not for forgiveness or closure, but for the complex truth that people are rarely all one thing. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood at her window watching the street where everything had changed 6 months ago. A patrol car drove by Rodriguez on night shift. The officer slowed, raised a hand in acknowledgement. Amara returned the gesture. At 3 a.m. her phone rang. Chief Williams again. "There's been another incident. Phoenix this time. An officer shot an unarmed black man during a traffic stop. The quiet circle formed, but the officer panicked, fired into the crowd. 3 wounded, including a child." Amara closed her eyes. "How bad?" "The child's in critical condition. 8 years old. Was just walking by with his mother when it happened." And people wonder why we form circles. "The Phoenix chief wants to talk to you. Says you're the only one who might be able to calm things down." "I'm not a negotiator, Chief." "No, but you're Amara Cole. That means something now, whether you wanted it to or not." Amara looked at the medal still in her hand, thought about the weight of unwanted symbolism. "Send me the details. I'll catch the first flight out." She packed light habit from years of rapid deployment. As she drove to the airport in the pre-dawn darkness, she thought about cycles, about how violence bred violence, Fear bred fear, and how somewhere in that spiral, someone had to be the one to step out of the pattern. The flight was full of journalists heading to cover the Phoenix shooting. They recognized her, whispered among themselves, but none approached. She'd developed what Rodriguez called the aura, a quality that made people think twice before intruding. Phoenix was already hot at 7 a.m. when she landed. The police chief's aide met her at baggage claim, a young officer who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Chen. Thank you for coming." "How's the child?" "Stable but critical. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "And the officer?" "On administrative leave pending investigation. He's not doing well." "Guilty conscience. Panic disorder. He's been hospitalized for his own safety." They drove through Phoenix's sprawling neighborhoods, past the hospital, where protesters had maintained vigil all night, to the police headquarters, where Chief Robert Martinez waited. Martinez was everything Williams wasn't: male Hispanic career cop from the streets up. But his eyes held the same exhaustion, the same weight of trying to bridge unbridgeable divides. "Thank you for coming, Commander Cole. Just Amara. I'm not here in any official capacity. You're here because what you represent might be the only thing that prevents this city from burning." "Cities don't burn because of one incident, Chief. They burn because of accumulated kindling. This is just the spark." "Then help me put it out before it catches." "I can't put out your fires, but I might be able to show people a different way to express their heat." The community meeting was scheduled for noon at a Baptist church in South Phoenix. By 11:30, it was standing room only, with hundreds more outside listening through speakers. The injured child's family was there, along with community leaders, activists, and a heavy police presence that seemed to make everyone more nervous. Amara entered through a side door, avoiding the main crowd, until she could assess the mood. It was angry, but controlled, grief-stricken, but determined. These people had been here before too many times. The pastor opened with a prayer that was part supplication, part indictment. "Lord, we pray for justice that has been too long delayed, for peace that has been too dearly bought, for children who should be playing, not lying in hospital beds with bullet wounds." When Amara was introduced, the room fell silent. She walked to the podium, slowly making eye contact with as many people as possible, acknowledging their pain with her presence before she spoke. "I'm not here to tell you how to feel," she began. "I'm not here to tell you to be calm or patient or forgiving. I'm here because a child is fighting for his life, and we need to figure out how to fight for his future, and all our futures, without adding more bodies to the count." "They shot a baby," someone yelled from the back. "Yes, they did. And that officer is in a psychiatric ward, having a breakdown because he knows what he did. That doesn't excuse, it doesn't minimize it, but it tells us something important. This isn't just about evil people doing evil things. It's about a system that puts terrified people in positions of power, gives them weapons, and tells them everyone is a threat." "So what do?" a woman near the front asked. "Keep forming circles. Keep being peaceful while they keep shooting." "The quiet circle isn't about being peaceful," Amara said, and the room stirred. "It's about being present. It's about refusing to be erased or ignored. It's about making them see us as human beings, not threats. And yes, sometimes that means risking violence." The 8-year-old who's fighting for his life, his name is Marcus, by the way, Marcus Thompson, he wasn't doing anything but existing, and that was enough to make him a casualty. She paused. Let the names sink in. Names mattered. They transformed statistics into people. "But here's what I know. The officer who shot into that crowd, Officer David Kim, is also in a hospital bed, restrained because he tried to hurt himself when he realized what he'd done. The system broke him too, just differently. Until we acknowledge that, until we stop seeing this as us versus them and start seeing it as all of us versus a broken system, nothing changes." The room erupted in mixed reactions, some agreement, some anger, some confusion. The injured boy's mother stood up, and the room quieted. My baby is in that hospital because he was walking to school, she said, voice breaking but determined. I don't care about that officer's breakdown. I care about my son. Amara stepped away from the podium, walked directly to the woman. What's your name? Denise. Denise Thompson. Denise, you're right. Your son is what matters. Everything else, the politics, the protests, even justice, it's all secondary to Marcus getting better. What do you need? I need... Denise started crying. I need to know this won't happen to another mother's baby. Amara embraced her, and in that moment, the room shifted from meeting to mourning, from politics to pain. Others gathered around them, forming a circle not of protest, but of support. Then we make sure it doesn't, Amara said. Not through violence, not through revenge, but through relentless presence. We show up at every city council meeting, every police review board, every training session. We make them see us, know us, recognize us as neighbors, not enemies. Chief Martinez stepped forward. The department is implementing immediate changes. With respect, Chief? Amara interrupted. We've heard about immediate changes before. What makes this different? You do, Martinez said simply. What you started in Northwind, the accountability, the transparency, the community involvement, we want that here. But we need the community to work with us, not against us. Then earn it, someone called out. How? Amara looked between Martinez and the crowd. Start with Officer Kim. Don't hide him away. Don't transfer him quietly. If he recovers, bring him here. Let him face this community. Apologize, take responsibility. Show us that officers who make mistakes, deadly mistakes, don't just disappear into the system. He's not well enough, Martinez started. When he is. And every officer involved in covering up, minimizing, or excusing excessive force, they come too. Not for punishment, but for truth. South Africa had truth and reconciliation commissions after apartheid. Maybe we need something similar. The idea hung in the air, radical, in its simplicity. Not just punishment or forgiveness, but truth, the foundation everything else had to be built on. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Plans were made, committees formed, demands articulated. The Quiet Circle Alliance officially established a Phoenix chapter with Denise Thompson as its reluctant but determined leader. As Amara prepared to leave, a young officer approached her Asian early 20s, looking scared. Ma'am, I'm Officer Kim's partner. I was there when... What's your name? Officer Lisa Park. Were you the one who called for medical immediately? Who tried to stop the bleeding? Park nodded, tears starting. I should have stopped him from shooting. I saw his panic. Should have isn't helpful. What happened happened. The question is, what you do now? I don't know. I became a cop to help people, but all I see is fear, theirs and ours. How do you serve people who are afraid of you? How do you protect yourself from people you're supposed to protect? Amara saw herself in this young officer, saw the idealism cracking against reality. You start by admitting the fear, on both sides. Then you work to earn trust, one interaction at a time. And when you see fellow officers making it worse, you step in. Not after, not later, in the moment. They'll label me a traitor. They labeled me a troublemaker. Labels only have the power you give them. Park straightened slightly. Would you be willing to speak at our training? Not the official one, but a group of us younger officers who want to be better. How many? Maybe 30. From departments across the state. We call ourselves the Morrison Group after Daniel Morrison. Amara felt that hope again, fragile, but real. Send me the details. The Morrison Group meeting was set for the following week, but Amara couldn't leave Phoenix yet. Marcus Thompson had taken a turn for the worse, and his mother had asked her to stay. So she found herself in a hospital waiting room at 2 a.m, surrounded by family members who'd adopted her as one of their own, not because of her fame, but because she'd shown up when it mattered. He loves superheroes, Denise was saying, clutching a worn Spider-Man figure. Always talking about how they protect people who can't protect themselves. I used to tell him the police were real-life superheroes. Her laugh was bitter. Can't tell him that anymore. Maybe you can tell him something better, Amara said quietly. That real heroes are complicated. They make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but they try to fix them. They grow. They learn. The officer who shot my baby isn't a hero. No, but your son might be. Surviving this, living through this, choosing how to respond to it, that takes heroism most adults don't have. The doctor appeared in the doorway, exhaustion written across her face. Everyone stood that terrible moment of anticipation before news that could shatter worlds. He's stable. The surgery went well. He's asking for his mom. The relief was physical people collapsing into chairs into each other's arms. Denise grabbed Amara's hand. Come with me. This should be family. You are family now. Whether you wanted it or not, you're part of this. The ICU was all mechanical breathing and electronic beeping, life reduced to numbers on screens. Marcus looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires making him seem more machine than boy. But his eyes were alert, tracking his mother's movement. Hey, baby, Denise whispered. How you feeling? Hurts. Marcus managed. Then his eyes found Amara. Who's she? A friend. Her name is Amara. Like tomorrow. The boy asked, the medication making connections loose. Close enough, Amara said, moving closer. Your mom says you like superheroes. Yeah. You won. No. Just someone who tries to help when things go wrong. Marcus studied her with that direct gaze children have before they learn to look away. Things went wrong with me, huh? Yeah, they did. Was it my fault? The question broke something in the room. Denise started crying silently. Amara knelt beside the bed, bringing herself to Marcus's eye level. No. Nothing about this was your fault. You were just walking to school. Sometimes bad things happen to people who did nothing wrong. It's not fair and it's not right, but it's not your fault. Mom says the policeman was scared. He was. Of me. Not of you specifically. Of something he imagined, something he was trained to see that wasn't really there. Marcus thought about this, his 8-year-old mind trying to process concepts that adults struggled with. Will he say sorry? I think he wants to. When you're feeling better, if you want to hear it. I don't know if I want to. That's okay too. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. That's your choice to make when and if you're ready. Marcus's eyes were getting heavy, the medications pulling him back toward sleep. Will you be here when I wake up? Amara looked at Denise, who nodded. I'll be around. As they left the ICU, Denise said, That Officer Kim, he sent a letter. I haven't opened it. Do you want to? Part of me wants to tear it up unread. Part of me needs to know what he could possibly say. They sat in the waiting room, the letter between them, like an unexploded ordnance. Finally, Denise opened it, read it silently, then handed it to Amara. The handwriting was shaky. Words crossed out and rewritten. Mrs. Thompson. I know there are no words that can undo what I've done. I shot your son. I saw a crowd forming, remembered my training about mob violence and panicked. I fired without thinking, without aiming, without remembering that crowds are made of people, that children walk to school, that my job was to protect, not destroy. I see your son's face every time I close my eyes. I will see it for the rest of my life. I don't ask for forgiveness. I haven't earned it and probably never will. But I needed you to know that I know what I did. I took an oath to protect and serve, and I failed in the worst possible way. If your son survives, and I pray every minute that he does, I will spend whatever's left of my life trying to make sure no other officer fails like I did. This isn't an excuse or a defense. It's just the truth from someone who destroyed his own life the moment he destroyed part of yours. David Kim. Denise took the letter back, folded it carefully. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything with it. Just knowing it exists is enough for now. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Chief Martinez appeared with several officers, their faces grim. Amara stood instinctively positioning herself between them and Denise. "Chief, there's been an incident. Officer Park Lisa Park, the one you spoke with, she was attacked leaving the station. 3 men apparently angry about Marcus. She's in surgery downstairs." Amara felt the familiar cold clarity that came with crisis. "How bad?" "Bad. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, head trauma. They worked her over pretty good before patrol units arrived." "And the attackers?" "In custody. One of them live-streamed it, talking about justice for Marcus while they beat her." Denise stood up, fury radiating from her small frame. "That's not justice. That's not what we want. Who told them to do this in my son's name?" "Nobody had to tell them," Martinez said tiredly. "Anger finds its own expression." Amara was already moving. "I need to see her. She's in surgery." "Then I'll wait. And Chief, you need to get ahead of this. If Park dies, if this escalates, everything we're trying to build dies with her." The surgical waiting room was on the 3rd floor, filled with officers in and out of uniform. They looked up when Amara entered, some with suspicion, others with something like hope. An older sergeant stood up, approached her. "You're Cole." "I am." "Park talked about you, said you gave her hope that things could be different. Now look where hope got her." "Hope didn't put her in that hospital bed. Hatred did. The question is whether we respond with more hatred or something else." "Like what? More circles? More peaceful protests while our people get beaten?" "Your people, my people. When did we start dividing humans into categories like we're different species?" The sergeant's jaw clenched. "When they started hunting us. And when you started hunting them. Don't pretend this is one-sided. The difference is you have badges and legal authority. With that comes higher responsibility." A younger officer interjected. "Park never hunted anyone. She joined the force 2 years ago, spent most of it trying to build relationships in the community. She volunteered at the youth center, coached basketball, actually lived in the neighborhood she patrolled. And this is what she gets." Amara sat down among them, a gesture that seemed to surprise everyone. "Tell me about her. Not Officer Park Lisa. Who is she?" The stories came slowly at first, then in a flood. Lisa Park, 24. Daughter of Korean immigrants, first in her family to be born in America. Graduated summa cum laude with a degree in social work, but chose law enforcement because she believed she could make a bigger difference from inside the system. Spoke 3 languages, used them to help immigrant families navigate legal troubles. Had been written up twice for excessive compassion, spending too much time helping instead of writing tickets. "She was what we should all be," one officer said quietly, "and they nearly killed her for it." The surgeon appeared after 4 hours, looking exhausted but relieved. "She's stable. It was touch and go, but she's a fighter. She's asking for someone named Amara." The ICU was becoming too familiar. Lisa Park looked even smaller than Marcus, had her face swollen beyond recognition, machines doing the work her body couldn't manage yet. But her eyes were open, alert, desperate to communicate. "Don't try to talk," Amara said. "Just listen. What happened to you wasn't your fault. It wasn't justice. It was violence looking for an excuse. The men who did this don't represent Marcus Thompson, or his family, or the movement for change. They represent the same rage that makes officers panic and shoot into crowds." Lisa's hand moved slightly. Amara took it gently. "You asked me how to serve people who fear you, how to protect yourself from people you're supposed to protect. This is how, by seeing that the fear and violence form a cycle, and someone has to be brave enough to break it. You were brave. You reached out, tried to bridge the gap. That some people responded with violence doesn't make you wrong, it makes you necessary." Tears leaked from Lisa's swollen eyes. She squeezed Amara's hand with what little strength she had. "The Morrison Group still wants to meet. Some of your fellow officers think it should be canceled, that it's too dangerous. But danger is exactly why it needs to happen. Can you blink once if you agree?" Lisa blinked deliberately firmly. Then it happens. And when you're well enough, you'll be there. Not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as an officer who survived the worst and still believes in better. When Amara left the hospital, the sun was rising over Phoenix, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Media vans lined the street, reporters ready to spin the narrative in whatever direction would generate the most views. She ignored them all, walking past with the same purposeful stride she'd had that morning in Northwind. Her phone rang. Rodriguez checking in from Northwind. Heard about Phoenix. You okay? 2 kids in the hospital, one fighting for her life because she tried to be a good cop, the other fighting for his because he existed while black. I'm not sure okay is possible anymore. You staying out there? Few more days. There's something building here, Janet. Not just anger, everyone expects that, but something else. Like people are finally tired of the same old responses to the same old tragedies. Or they're just tired. Maybe, but tired people sometimes do desperate things, and sometimes desperate things lead to change. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Hallie's funeral is tomorrow, private service, family only, but his sister asked me to tell you she doesn't blame you. Said if anything, you gave him a chance to confront who he'd become. Not everyone takes that chance, but at least he had it. After the call, Amara found herself in a small diner near the hospital, the kind that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and silence thick enough to think in. She was halfway through her second cup when someone slid into the booth across from her. A young black man, maybe 25, wearing a Phoenix Suns jersey and an expression caught between anger and anguish. You're her, Amara Cole. She nodded, waiting. My brother was one of the ones who beat that cop, Lisa Park. Amara set down her coffee cup carefully. I see. He's not a bad person. He's just... Marcus could have been his son, you know. My nephew's the same age, goes to the same school. When he saw that boy shot, something snapped. What's your name? Terrell. Terrell Washington. What do you want from me, Terrell? I don't know. Maybe to understand how you do it. How you stay calm when they're killing us. How you don't burn it all down. Who says I don't want to burn it all down? Terrell looked surprised. But you don't. You stand there all dignified and shit-talking about broken systems and mutual understanding. Because burning it down means Marcus Thompson and Lisa Park burn too. It means your nephew burns. It means we all burn, and from the ashes comes something worse, not better. I've seen countries torn apart by violence, Terrell. Nobody wins. Everybody just loses differently. So we just take it. No, we change it. But change and destruction aren't the same thing, even when destruction feels more satisfying. Terrell was quiet, staring at his untouched coffee. My brother's looking at attempted murder charges. His kids won't have a father for 20 years, maybe. And for what? That cop he beat, she was one of the good ones. But he didn't know that. All he saw was the uniform. The same way Officer Kim saw a threat instead of an 8-year-old boy. Fear makes us stupid, Terrell. All of us. So what do I tell my brother's kids? That their dad was scared? Tell them the truth. That their father loved his community so much it made him crazy with grief when he saw it hurt. That he made a terrible mistake trying to fix pain with more pain. That love without wisdom can be as destructive as hate. Terrell laughed bitterly. Love without wisdom. That should be on America's money instead of In God We Trust. Maybe. But wisdom can be learned. Your brother will have time to learn it. The question is whether the rest of us will learn it before more kids end up in hospital beds. Before Terrell could respond, Amara's phone buzzed. A text from the Morrison Group. Meeting still on for tonight if you are. 47 officers confirmed, some driving from other states. We need this. She showed it to Terrell. 47 cops want to learn how to be better. Your brother and his friends put one of them in the ICU. Who do you think is trying harder to break the cycle? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Either we're moving toward each other or away. Either we're building bridges or walls. Your brother chose walls. These officers are choosing bridges. What are you choosing? Terrell stood to leave, then paused. That meeting tonight. Could I come, not to start anything, just to listen? Why? Because maybe I need to see cops as people before another one of us ends up in the hospital. Or dead. Amara considered. One condition. You bring Marcus Thompson's mother, if she's willing. Let these officers see who their fear affects. The Morrison Group meeting was held in a community center in a neutral neighborhood, one that belonged to neither the police nor the community, but to both. When Amara arrived, the parking lot was full but quiet. No protesters, no media. The location had been kept secret until an hour before. Inside, 47 officers sat in a circle. No podium, no hierarchy, just humans in uniform trying to figure out how to be better. Lisa Park's empty chair sat with her badge on it, present in absence. Daniel Morrison Jr. stood as Amara entered. Thank you for coming. We weren't sure you would after what happened to Park. What happened to Park is why I'm here. She took her place in the circle, noting how some officers leaned forward while others sat rigid with skepticism. Then the door opened again, and Denise Thompson entered with Terrell Washington. The room went electric with tension. Mrs. Thompson, Morrison said, confused. I invited them, Amara said. We can't have this conversation in a vacuum. The community needs to be part of it. The community beat one of us nearly to death, an officer said. And one of you shot her 8-year-old son. Denise replied, her voice steady. So either we keep trading violence or we try something else. I'm here for something else. She sat down Terrell beside her. The circle broke and reformed to include them. Let's start with truth, Amara said. Officer Morrison, tell us about your father. Morrison spoke about growing up in a cop's house, about pride and fear in equal measure, about the day his father died, and how it shaped his decision to wear the badge. Other officers followed, sharing their origins, some from military backgrounds, others from communities ravaged by crime. Still others who just wanted steady work with good benefits. Then Denise spoke about Marcus, about raising a black son in America, about the talk every black parent has to give about surviving police encounters. I taught him to be respectful, to comply, to make himself small and non-threatening. All that training, and he still got shot walking to school. I gave my son the same talk, one black officer said quietly. Even though I'm a cop. Because I know what fear does to people with guns. The conversation continued for 3 hours. No solutions, no resolutions, just truth laid bare. Stories of officers afraid every traffic stop might be their last. Stories of citizens afraid every traffic stop might be their last. The same fear reflected infinitely between two groups who should be on the same side. We're trained to see threats, a young officer admitted. Every training video shows cops being killed. Every briefing reminds us we might not go home. By the time we hit the streets, we're primed to see danger everywhere. And we're trained to see you as dangers, Terrell responded. Every video of police violence, every story of someone who didn't survive an encounter. By the time we see you coming, we're primed to expect the worst. It's like both sides are traumatized, Denise said. And trauma makes people do terrible things. So how do we heal? Morrison asked. How do we break the cycle? Amara stood, walked to Lisa Park's empty chair, picked up her badge. We start by acknowledging what Officer Park understood, that the uniform doesn't make you separate from the community. It makes you more accountable to it. Every officer here needs to live in or near the neighborhoods they patrol. Not just drive through in cruisers, but walk shop, exist in these spaces as people, first officers, second. Department won't mandate that, someone said. Then do it anyway. Park did. She was attacked not because she was known, but because she was unknown to the attackers. They saw uniform, not person. Same way Officer Kim saw threat, not child. What else? Morrison asked, genuinely seeking. Training. Not just tactical, but psychological. Understanding trauma responses, both yours and the community's. Learning to recognize when fear is driving decisions. Having tools beyond compliance and force. The department barely funds the training we have. Then we fund it ourselves. Morrison said, surprising everyone. If the department won't invest in us being better, we invest in ourselves. We find experts, we pay for sessions, we do the work. Other officers nodded, the momentum building. Ideas flew right along, programs where community members could see the job's realities. Community service requirements, where officers could see the community's realities. Accountability partnerships, where officers and citizens reviewed incidents together. None of this will matter if bad cops stay protected, Denise said. Officer Halley had 43 complaints. 43. How many people were hurt before someone finally stood up to him? The room went quiet. This was the line many officers couldn't cross, the blue wall of silence that protected the worst among them. My dad used to say that a cop who covers for a bad cop is a bad cop, Morrison said slowly. I thought it was black and white when he said it. Now I know it's true. Every time we stay silent, we become complicit. Easy to say, an older officer challenged. Harder when it's your partner, your friend, someone who's had your back. Lisa Park had my back, a young officer said. She also reported me when I used excessive force on a drunk driver who spit on me. I hated her for it at the time. Now I realize she saved my career, maybe my soul. That drunk driver was someone's father. I let anger make me forget that. The admission opened floodgates. Officers confessing moments they'd crossed lines, times they'd stayed silent when they shouldn't have, the slow erosion of principles under pressure and peer influence. This is what I mean by truth and reconciliation, Amara said. Not punishment, but acknowledgement. Not forgetting, but forgiving when earned. Officer Kim wants to apologize to Marcus when he's well enough. Some of you might need to make similar apologies. Some might need to receive them. I owe about a dozen apologies, one officer admitted. People I treated as suspects, first, humans second. Don't even know how to find them all. Start with one, Denise suggested. My husband was stopped by police 15 times in 2 years just walking to work. Same route, same time, different officers acting like he was casing houses. One apology from one officer would have meant everything. The meeting ended without fanfare, officers and citizens exchanging contact information, planning follow-ups, creating something that wasn't quite friendship, but might become trust. As people filed out, Terrell approached Amara. My brother wants to apologize to Officer Park, from jail, but still. Would she accept it? I don't know, but the asking matters, even if the answer is no. Like Officer Kim and Marcus. Exactly. Apologies aren't for the apologizer. They're acknowledgments of harm, promises to do better. Whether they're accepted is irrelevant to their necessity. Outside, Phoenix's heat had broken into an unexpected rainstorm, the kind that floods streets and washes the desert clean. Officers and citizens stood under the awning together, waiting for it to pass, sharing the human moment of being caught by weather. It's something, Morrison said, standing beside Amara. Not everything, but something. Everything starts with something. Will you keep doing this? These meetings, these interventions? I never wanted to do any of this. I just wanted to walk through my neighborhood. But walking through my neighborhood means other people need to be able to walk through theirs, and apparently that's going to take some work. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Marcus was awake, stable, asking for the lady who's like tomorrow. She showed it to Denise, who smiled for the first time in days. He wants to see you. Then I'll go. But Denise, he's going to need more than visits. He's going to need therapy support, a way to process what happened without letting it define him. The city said they'd cover medical but nothing else. Then we create something else. A fund, a program, something for all the kids caught in the crossfire of adult fears. Morrison overheard. The Morrison Group could contribute, fundraise, make it part of our mission, not just being better cops, but helping heal the damage bad policing has done. And there it was, the seed of something larger. Not just reaction, but proactive change. Not just meetings, but movement. As Amara drove back to the hospital through flooded streets, she thought about cycles and how they break. Sometimes dramatically with violence and revolution, but sometimes quietly with conversations in community centers, with admissions of fault, with hands extended across divides. Marcus was sitting up when she arrived, struggling with jello, but determined. His face lit up when he saw her. "Tomorrow, lady?" "Just Amara Marcus. Mom says you're helping people not be scared of each other." "Trying to? Is it working?" She thought about the meeting, about officers and citizens in the same circle, about truths told and heard. "Ask me tomorrow." "You'll be here tomorrow." "I'll be somewhere tomorrow. Maybe here, maybe home, maybe somewhere else where people need reminding that fear doesn't have to win." Marcus considered this with 8-year-old seriousness. "I was scared when I got shot, but I'm not scared now. Does that mean I win?" "Yeah, Marcus. That means you win." The call came at 4 in the morning, 3 days after the Morrison Group meeting. Amara was still in Phoenix, sleeping in a motel room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and old cigarettes, when her phone erupted with urgency. It was Rodriguez, and her voice carried a weight that made Amara instantly alert. "There's been a shooting in Northwind. Mass casualty. A gunman opened fire at the police station." Amara sat up, already reaching for her clothes. "How bad?" 7 dead, 12 wounded. The gunman left a manifesto. He mentioned you, Amara. Mentioned Hallie, mentioned everything that's happened. Said he was finishing what should have been started. The flight back to Northwind felt like traveling through molasses, time stretching impossibly, as Amara processed what this meant. Everything they'd been building, every bridge carefully constructed between police and community, could collapse under the weight of one person's violent rage. Chief Williams met her at the airport, looking like she'd aged years in hours. 3 of my officers are dead. 4 civilians who were filing reports. The youngest victim was 22, fresh out of the academy. She'd been on the job exactly 1 week. The shooter. Dead. Killed himself after he ran out of ammunition. White male, 38, no criminal record. His manifesto it's complicated. He talks about supporting police reform, but says peaceful methods don't work. Claims he's starting a war that needs to be fought. He's destroyed everything we've been working toward. Maybe. Or maybe this is when the work really matters. When it's hardest. The police station was a crime scene wrapped in yellow tape and tragedy. Media from around the world had descended, turning Northwind into a symbol of America's violence problem. But Amara noticed something else. Members of the quiet circle were there too, standing vigil not in protest, but in mourning their presence. A statement that violence was violence regardless of who committed it or why. Patricia Henderson was among them, the elderly woman who'd witnessed Amara's encounter with Hallie. She embraced Amara with surprising strength. "This isn't what we wanted. This isn't what any of us wanted." "I know. But they'll use it against us, won't they? Say this is what police reform leads to." "Some will. The question is whether we let them control the narrative or we write our own." William Thompson, the Marine veteran, approached with a group of other veterans. "We've been talking. We want to provide security for the funerals. Not armed, just present. A wall of veterans between the grieving and anyone who might try to exploit this. The department might not accept that. Already cleared it with Williams. She knows her officers need to grieve without becoming targets or symbols." The manifesto was released to the public that afternoon, and it was worse than Amara had feared. The shooter, Gregory Paulson, had twisted her message of dignity and resistance into a call for violence. He'd taken her words about standing ground and transformed them into standing your ground with bullets. He'd mentioned her 17 times each reference, a perversion of everything she'd actually said. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Social media exploded with accusations that Amara had inspired the shooting, that the Quiet Circle was a terrorist organization, that police reform was code for police elimination. Death threats flooded in some specific enough that the FBI got involved. But there was also support. The Morrison Group released a statement distinguishing between reform and violence, affirming their commitment to change through dialogue, not bullets. Marcus Thompson, still recovering, but determined, recorded a video from his hospital bed saying, "The man who shot those people isn't a hero. He's just another person who chose hurting over healing." Officer Lisa Park, barely able to speak, but insistent on being heard, gave an interview from her own hospital bed. Violence against police doesn't honor victims of police violence. It just creates more victims. My attackers didn't help Marcus Thompson by putting me here. This shooter didn't help anyone by killing my colleagues. We have to be better than our worst impulses, all of us. The funerals were held 3 days later, all 7 on the same day the city effectively shut down in mourning. True to their word, veterans formed protective corridors allowing families to grieve without intrusion. The Quiet Circle stood at a respectful distance, their silence speaking volumes about shared humanity in the face of tragedy. Amara attended every funeral. At each, she was met with different reactions: anger from some, gratitude from others, confusion from most. At the service for Emma Martinez, the 22-year-old rookie, Emma's mother approached her. "You're Amara Cole." "Yes, ma'am." "My daughter admired you. Said you showed that strength didn't require violence. She joined the force because she wanted to be the kind of officer who could face someone like you without fear, who could see citizen, not threat." "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Are you? Or are you sorry she was a cop?" The question cut deep because it touched on something Amara had been wrestling with. "I'm sorry she didn't get the chance to be the officer she wanted to be. I'm sorry someone decided that violence was the answer to violence. I'm sorry your daughter is dead. The uniform doesn't change any of that." Emma's mother studied her for a long moment, then pulled out a folded paper. "She wrote this the night before she died, after everything that happened in Phoenix, after the Morrison Group meeting she watched online. She was going to send it to you." The letter was written in careful script. "Ms. Cole, you don't know me, but your story is why I'm becoming a police officer. Not the viral video part, but what you said after about the difference between authority and tyranny, about accountability and service. I grew up in a neighborhood where police were the enemy, where we ran when we saw cruisers. I want kids in that neighborhood to see a cruiser and feel safe, not scared. I want to be the officer you could have walked past that morning without incident, who would have waved and kept going, because a black woman walking is just a person walking. I start my first shift tomorrow. I'm terrified I'll become what I swore to fight against, but I'm more terrified of not trying. Thank you for showing that standing up doesn't require stepping on others. Officer Emma Martinez." Hopefully by the time you read this. Amara read it twice, then handed it back with shaking hands. She understood. She really understood. She died understanding. That has to mean something. It means everything. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. A group of counter-protesters had arrived carrying signs with the victims' pictures and slogans like, "Amara's Army kills cops," and "Reform, ill murder." They were met by another group, supporters of Reform, who saw the shooting as a tragic outlier, not a consequence. The two groups faced each other across the church parking lot, tension crackling between them. Someone threw a bottle. Someone else threw a punch. Within seconds, it was a brawl. The funeral transformed into a battlefield. Amara moved without thinking, walking directly into the center of the violence. Not to fight, but to stand. Just stand. Others saw her and followed, veterans, Quiet Circle members, even some off-duty officers from the Morrison Group. They formed a human barrier between the two fighting groups, not taking sides, just creating space. "Stop," Amara said, her voice carrying, despite not yelling. "Just stop. There are 7 families in that church saying goodbye to their loved ones. Whatever you're fighting about, it can wait until they've had that moment. The fighting continued for another few seconds, then gradually ceased, combatants stepping back. Some looking ashamed, others still furious but contained. "You want someone to blame for those deaths?" Amara continued. "Blame Gregory Paulson. He pulled the trigger. Not reform, not resistance, not the conversation about police accountability. One man with a gun and a twisted interpretation of justice. Don't give him more power by letting his violence divide us further." Someone from the counter-protest group shouted, "Your words inspired him." Martin Luther King's words inspired people too. Some used them to march peacefully. Others used them to justify riots. Words don't kill people. People's choices kill people. Paulson chose violence. I choose accountability. What do you choose? She turned and walked back into the church, leaving the two groups separated by the human barrier that remained in place. The funeral continued without further disruption, but the damage was done. The national narrative had shifted from police reform to police protection, from accountability to security. That evening, Amara sat in her Northwind home for the first time in over a week. The street was quiet, but she could see unmarked FBI vehicles at both ends, protection she hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse given the credible threats. Rodriguez came by with Chinese takeout and bourbon, the universal cure for impossible situations. They sat on the back porch eating in silence until Rodriguez finally spoke. "Some of the officers want to abandon the reform efforts. Say it's too dangerous now that Paulson proved the community wants them dead." "Paulson wasn't the community. He was one sick individual. Try telling that to officers planning their own funerals. Fear makes people stupid. We covered this. Fear also keeps people alive. These officers have families, Amara. Kids who need parents to come home." Amara set down her food suddenly, not hungry. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we pushed too hard too fast. Maybe people needed more time to adjust." "How much time? Another generation? Another century? How many more Marcus Thompsons get shot while we're giving people time to adjust? How many more Emma Martinezes get shot while we're pushing for change?" They sat with the impossible equation, two women trying to balance lives on scales that refused to stabilize. "There's something else," Rodriguez said eventually. "Internal Affairs wants to interview you about your interactions with Paulson." "I never interacted with him." "He attended 3 quiet circle gatherings. He was in the crowd the morning Hallie stopped you. His manifesto suggests he saw you as a leader even if you didn't know he existed. So now I'm responsible for every person who witnessed what happened." "No, but they need to document everything, cover their bases. The union is pushing hard, saying the department enabled anti-police sentiment that led to this. The department enabled Hallie's behavior for 8 years. And Hallie's dead too. Everyone's dead, Amara. That's the problem. The bodies keep piling up and nobody knows how to make it stop." The next morning brought more bad news. The Phoenix prosecutor had dropped charges against the men who'd beaten Lisa Park, citing insufficient evidence despite video footage. The community erupted in celebration, while police unions called it a travesty of justice. The cycle continued, each side viewing victories and defeats through entirely different lenses. Amara's phone rang constantly. Interviews, speaking engagements. People wanting her to lead movements, oppose movements. Comment on everything from local police budgets to international human rights. She ignored them all until one number made her answer. "This is David Kim," the voice said, shaky but determined. "The officer who shot Marcus Thompson." Amara closed her eyes. "Officer Kim." "Former officer. I resigned yesterday. I can't. After Northwind, after seeing what one person's violence can do, I can't be part of this anymore." Running away doesn't solve anything. Neither does staying in a job where I've already proven I can't handle the pressure. I wanted to tell you directly I'm done. With all of it. "What will you do?" "I don't know. Therapy for starters. Maybe forever. I need to figure out how I became someone who could shoot into a crowd with a child in it. When you figure it out, share it with others. your story, your failure, your recovery. That could help other officers recognize when they're heading down the same path. Who would listen to me? I'm the cop who shot an 8-year-old. Exactly. You're the cautionary tale every officer needs to hear. Not from training videos or hypotheticals, but from someone who lived it, who has to live with it. Kim was quiet for a long moment. Marcus's mother, could I ever actually apologize? I don't know. But the apology matters even if she never hears it. Write it down. Every word, every feeling. Even if it never reaches her, the writing matters. After Kim hung up, Amara sat in her kitchen staring at nothing. 7 police officers dead, 1 8-year-old recovering, 1 officer beaten nearly to death, 1 officer dead by suicide. The mathematics of violence kept adding up to nothing but loss. A knock at her door interrupted her spiral. Through the peephole, she saw a group of teenagers, all black and brown, wearing matching t-shirts with the future printed on them. She opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" The one in front, a girl maybe 16, spoke with confidence beyond her years. "Ms. Cole, we're from Northwind High. We wanted to talk to you about something we're organizing." "I'm not really taking meetings. Please, 5 minutes. It's important." Against her better judgment, Amara let them in. They sat in her living room, 8 teenagers who should have been worried about homework and dating instead of police violence and community trauma. "We're calling it the Bridge Program," the girl who introduced herself as Maya explained. "Students paired with officers, but not like those scared straight programs or ride-alongs. Real partnerships. We help them understand our communities. They help us understand their jobs. Building relationships before crisis, not after." "The department won't agree to that, not now. Chief Williams already has, tentatively. She says if we can get community buy-in and officer volunteers, she'll approve a pilot program." After everything that's happened, because of everything that's happened, another student, a boy named Carlos, said, "Mr. Paulson thought violence was the answer. Officer Halley thought force was the answer. Nobody's trying understanding as the answer." "Some are," Amara said, thinking of the Morrison Group. "Then help us expand it. You don't have to lead anything, just endorse it. Show up to the first meeting. Let people see that someone they respect thinks this could work." Amara looked at these young faces carrying hope despite having every reason not to. "What makes you think I have any credibility left? Half the country thinks I inspired a mass shooter." "And half thinks you're showing a way forward," Maya countered. "We don't need everyone. We just need enough people willing to try." The Bridge program launch was set for 2 weeks later despite fierce opposition from both police unions and some community activists. The venue was Northwind High's gymnasium neutral ground that belonged to the future more than the past. The morning of the launch, Amara woke to find her front lawn covered in flowers. Not a memorial, but a garden someone had planted hundreds of bulbs, overnight flowers, that would bloom in spring long after the current crisis had passed. The note, unsigned, simply said, "For tomorrow." She thought of Marcus calling her the Tomorrow Lady of Emma Martinez, writing about the officer she hoped to be tomorrow, of all the tomorrows that had been stolen, and all the ones that might still be saved. The gymnasium was packed beyond capacity. Students, officers, parents, community members, all gathering despite the risk, despite the fear, despite the voices saying this was pointless or dangerous, or both. Chief Williams was there looking exhausted but determined. Rodriguez representing the officers, still willing to engage. The Morrison Group now grown to over 100 members from across the state. And in the front row, 2 people who shouldn't have been there at all. Denise Thompson and Lisa Park, both still recovering, both insisting on attending. Maya took the podium first, her voice strong and clear. 2 weeks ago, 7 people died because someone thought violence was the answer. 6 months ago, this all started because an officer thought force was the answer. Today, we're proposing something different. Not perfect, not complete, but different. She explained the program students and officers paired for 6 months, meeting weekly, sharing meals, attending each other's important events. Not to make friends necessarily, but to make humans out of uniforms and statistics out of stereotypes. "We're not naive," Maya continued. "We know this won't solve everything. But if one officer sees a black teenager as a person instead of a threat, if one student sees an officer as a human instead of an enemy, that's progress." The first pairing was announced. Carlos would be partnered with Officer Morrison. They stood together, awkward but willing, shaking hands for the cameras and the future. Then Emma Martinez's mother stepped forward, uninvited but unopposed. "My daughter would have volunteered for this program. Since she can't, I will. I'll take her place, work with any student willing to help me understand why she died and how we prevent the next death." The room erupted in applause. Then more volunteers came forward. Officers and citizens, students and adults, all stepping into the uncertain space between fear and hope. Amara was asked to speak, and for once, she didn't refuse. Standing at the podium, looking out at this impossible gathering, she found words she didn't know she had. Gregory Paulson thought he was finishing something. Stephen Halley thought he was protecting something. Both were wrong. There's nothing to finish because this work is never done. There's nothing to protect except each other. Every person in this room has lost something to violence. Trust, safety, loved ones, innocence. The question isn't whether we've lost, but whether we'll let loss define us. She paused, finding Denise Thompson's eyes, Lisa Parks, Chief Williams's. "I wanted to take a walk, that's all. One morning, I wanted to walk through my neighborhood without being seen as a threat. That walk led to all of this, the good and the bad, the progress and the setbacks, the hope and the horror. I can't take that walk back, can't undo what it started. But I can choose what it means." She looked at the students, the future, sitting in folding chairs. "It means that walking while black isn't a crime. It means that wearing a badge doesn't make you above the law. It means that violence, whether from a racist cop or a vengeful citizen, solves nothing. It means that the only way forward is together, even when together seems impossible." The Bridge program officially launched that day with 23 pairs committed to the 6-month trial. It would face challenges. 2 officers would drop out after pressure from colleagues. 1 student would be arrested, creating tensions, but it would survive. More importantly, it would spread. As people filed out, Amara found herself standing with Lisa Park, both watching the crowd disperse into the afternoon sun. "Think it'll work?" Lisa asked, her voice still rough from her injuries. "Something will. Maybe not this, maybe not perfectly, but something. People are tired of the alternative." The alternative being more hospitals, more funerals, more fear. Lisa nodded slowly. "I'm going back on duty next month. Light-duty desk work, but still. I'm terrified. Of everything. The community that attacked me. The officers who think I'm weak for being attacked. The possibility that nothing we're doing will matter." "It matters," Amara said firmly. "Every conversation, every connection, every moment we choose, understanding over assumption. It all matters. Even when people die. Especially then, the dead can't speak for themselves. We have to speak for them, and what we say defines what their deaths mean." As Amara drove home, she passed the memorial at Magnolia and 3rd, where everything had started. New additions had appeared: 7 small stones for the Northwind officers, a toy for Marcus Flowers that seemed to regenerate daily. The memorial had become a living thing, growing with each tragedy and triumph. She stopped, stood there for a moment, remembering that morning with Halley. How different everything might have been if he'd simply kept driving. How different everything might have been if she'd simply shown her ID. But those were yesterday's choices, and yesterday was gone. Tomorrow was what mattered now. Tomorrow, when Bridge program pairs would meet for their first real sessions. Tomorrow, when Marcus would walk again. Tomorrow, when the seeds planted in her yard would push through soil toward sun. She thought about Gregory Paulson, alone with his rage and his gun choosing violence because he couldn't imagine another way. She thought about Stephen Halley alone with his fear and his badge choosing force because he couldn't see past his assumptions. Both dead now, their tomorrows stolen by their todays. But there were other tomorrows, other choices. Lisa Park choosing to return to duty despite everything. Daniel Morrison Jr. choosing to honor his father through reform, not resistance. Maya and Carlos and their classmates choosing to build bridges where others had built walls. The quiet circle had evolved beyond what anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about surrounding injustice anymore, it was about surrounding each other, creating spaces where difficult conversations could happen, where pain could be acknowledged without being weaponized. That evening, as Amara sat on her back porch, Rodriguez joined her again, this time with pizza and beer. "Heard from Phoenix," Rodriguez said. "Marcus went home today. Full recovery expected." "Good." "And Kim, the officer who shot him, he started speaking at the academy, telling his story, warning signs he missed in himself the moment he lost control. The recruits listen because he's not preaching, he's confessing. Confession can be powerful. If people listen, someone always listens, maybe not the ones who most need to, but someone." They sat in comfortable silence, two women who'd seen too much, but still believed in tomorrow. The stars came out, same constellations that had watched over humanity's long struggle with itself. "You know what I keep thinking about," Rodriguez said eventually. "Emma Martinez. 22 years old, 1 week on the job, dead because some lunatic thought killing cops would fix things. She never got to be the officer she wanted to be. No, but others will. Because of her, not despite her. Every officer who joins the bridge program, everyone who chooses de-escalation over dominance, they're honoring her whether they know it or not. And Halley? Does anyone honor him?" Amara considered this carefully. Maybe honor isn't the right word, but acknowledge, yes. He was a warning, a cautionary tale, a mirror showing what happens when fear and power combine without wisdom or accountability. His death doesn't redeem him, but it reminds us that the system breaks everyone eventually, even those who think they're benefiting from it. So we fix the system. We try, knowing we might fail. Knowing that trying might get us killed by someone like Paulson or someone like Halley, but trying anyway because the alternative is accepting that this is the best we can do. And you don't accept that, do you? Rodriguez smiled sadly. No. Stubborn optimism, despite all evidence to the contrary. Or stubborn realism that says humans are capable of being better than their worst moments. A text arrived on Amara's phone. From Lisa Park. "First bridge meeting tomorrow. My partner is Maya. I'm terrified. Any advice?" Amara showed it to Rodriguez, then typed back. "Be terrified. Be honest about being terrified. Let her see that officers are human. That's the first bridge." The first bridge meeting between Lisa Park and Maya took place in a coffee shop neutral enough to belong to neither cops nor teenagers, just humans needing caffeine. Amara watched from across the street, not spying but bearing witness to this small attempt at connection. Lisa's hands shook as she lifted her cup, the tremor a leftover from the beating that had nearly killed her. Maya noticed, said nothing, but pushed the sugar closer in a gesture so small and kind it could break hearts. 3 weeks had passed since the program launch, and the world hadn't ended. It hadn't transformed either, but somewhere between apocalypse and paradise, people were trying. The news had moved on to fresher tragedies, leaving Northwind to wrestle with its demons in relative privacy. Amara's phone rang as she walked home from observing the meeting. Chief Williams' voice tight with something that wasn't quite panic, but was adjacent to it. "We have a situation. There's been a death in custody. Lamar Johnson picked up for public intoxication last night. Found unresponsive in his cell this morning." The familiar cold settled in Amara's chest. "How?" "That's being investigated, but the community's already gathering at the station. This could go bad quickly." "I'm not a negotiator, Chief. We've covered this." "No, but you're trusted. by both sides somehow. Just, can you come, not to speak, just to be present? When Amara arrived at the station, she found a crowd of about 200 people, angry but contained. The quiet circle had formed automatically, phones out recording everything. But there was something different in the air, a electricity that suggested violence was one wrong word away. Lamar Johnson's sister Vanessa stood at the front, tears streaming, but voice steady. My brother was an alcoholic. He was sick, not criminal. He needed help, not a cell. And now he's dead, and they won't even tell us how. Williams emerged from the station, and the crowd surged forward. But instead of retreating, she held her ground, then did something unexpected. She removed her badge, set it on the ground, and knelt beside it. I failed Lamar Johnson, she said loud enough for all to hear. Whether through negligence or system failure or something worse, he died in my custody. I'm responsible. The crowd went silent, processing this admission that they'd never expected to hear. I've ordered all custody footage released within the hour unedited. I've requested an independent investigation, not internal affairs, but an outside agency. And I'm here without my badge as a person who failed another person to ask what you need from me. Vanessa Johnson stepped forward, staring down at the kneeling police chief. I need my brother back. I can't give you that. I'm sorry. Then I need the truth. All of it. Not the sanitized version, not the legally protected version. The truth. You'll have it. An hour later, the footage was released. It showed Lamar Johnson heavily intoxicated being processed. It showed him placed in a cell. It showed him vomiting, choking, struggling. It showed nobody coming for 17 minutes despite his cell being under surveillance. By the time help arrived, he was unconscious. He never woke up. The officer monitoring the cameras that night was a rookie overwhelmed with multiple situations who'd missed the signs of distress. Not malicious, just negligent. But negligence that costs lives isn't much different from malice to those left behind. The rookie officer, Tommy Chen. No relation to Jessica Chen. The reporter came forward voluntarily, standing before the crowd without being asked. I killed Lamar Johnson, he said, voice breaking. Not intentionally, but through my failure. I was monitoring 12 cells, handling radio calls, trying to process paperwork. I should have seen him in distress. I should have responded. I didn't. He's dead because I didn't do my job. Someone in the crowd threw a bottle. It missed Chen but shattered against the station wall. Williams moved to shield him, but Chen stepped around her. No, he said. I deserve their anger. Lamar Johnson deserved better than my incompetence. Amara watched this unfold, saw the moment building toward something, violence or breakthrough, she couldn't tell. She moved through the crowd, not to the front, but to Vanessa Johnson standing beside her in silent solidarity. What do you want to happen? Amara asked quietly. I want my brother to not be dead. Besides that. Vanessa looked at Officer Chen Young and terrified and genuinely remorseful. I want him to live with this. Every day. I want him to wake up knowing he killed someone through carelessness. I want him to carry it forever. He will. How do you know? Look at his eyes. He's already dead inside. The question is whether his death serves any purpose. Vanessa turned to face Amara fully. You're the one who started all this, the walking woman. I just wanted to walk. And my brother just wanted to drink himself numb because life hurt too much. Neither of you should have ended up here. She was right. The distance between a morning walk and a death in custody shouldn't have been measurable, but here they were connected by threads of systemic failure and human fallibility. Officer Chen was still standing there, waiting for judgment or violence or absolution. The crowd seemed uncertain what to offer. Finally, Maya, the teenager from the bridge program, stepped forward. Officer Chen, will you join the bridge program? Let us teach you to see people, not problems. Let my generation help you, not make these mistakes again. Chen looked confused, then hopeful, then ashamed of feeling hopeful. I don't deserve... Nobody deserves anything, Maya interrupted. We're not talking about deserving. We're talking about learning, about being better. You failed Lamar Johnson. Will you fail the next person too, or will you learn? It was a lifeline, unexpected and maybe unearned. Chen grabbed it. I'll learn. I'll do whatever it takes to never fail like this again. The crowd didn't disperse so much as fragment small groups discussing what had just happened. Whether accountability without punishment was justice or insult. Amara stayed with Vanessa, who stood staring at the station like she could will her brother back into existence. There should be a memorial, Vanessa said suddenly. Not just for Lamar, but for everyone who's died unnecessarily. Cops, civilians, everyone. A place that reminds people that every death matters. The corner of Magnolia and 3rd is about you. This should be about all of us. She was right. The memorial that had grown from Amara's encounter had become something, but not quite the right something. It needed to be bigger, more inclusive, more honest about the full scope of loss. Over the next month, Vanessa Johnson and Emma Martinez's mother, Sophia, worked together to create what they called the Garden of Unnecessary Sorrows. It was built in the park at the center of Northwind, accessible to all, impossible to ignore. Each death, whether cop or civilian, whether by police action or violence against police, was marked by a planted tree. The garden grew quickly, too quickly, a forest of loss that forced people to confront the scale of the problem. The opening ceremony drew thousands. Amara spoke briefly about the weight of carrying other people's pain and the necessity of doing it anyway. Chief Williams spoke about the burden of authority and the ease with which it becomes abuse. But the most powerful moment came when Officer Chen and Vanessa Johnson planted Lamar's tree together, both crying, neither offering or seeking forgiveness, just acknowledging shared humanity in the face of irreversible loss. The bridge program, meanwhile, had evolved beyond its original conception. The pairs weren't just meeting, they were creating projects together. Morrison and Carlos had started a basketball league where cops and kids played on mixed teams, breaking down barriers through shared sweat and competition. Lisa Park and Maya were documenting their conversations, creating a podcast that had somehow gone viral, their honest discussions about fear and prejudice resonating far beyond Northwind. But not everything was progress. 3 officers had quit the force in protest of Williams's reforms, claiming she'd betrayed the badge. One had leaked department emails suggesting some officers were deliberately slowing response times to teach the community a lesson about needing police. The community responded by forming volunteer patrol groups, not vigilantes, but witnesses, people willing to walk the streets and be present. It was during one of these volunteer patrols that Amara encountered someone she hadn't expected to see again. Stephen Halley's sister Margaret. Margaret was thin, weathered by grief, and something else, maybe guilt, maybe anger, maybe just the weight of being related to someone who'd become a symbol of everything wrong with policing. "Ms. Cole," Margaret said, not quite a greeting. "Ms. Halley." They stood on the sidewalk, 2 women connected by a death that had started everything and resolved nothing. "I've been following what you're doing," Margaret said. "The bridge program, the gardens, all of it. It's not just me. But it started with you, with Stephen stopping you that morning. It started long before that. Your brother was just the spark that lit kindling that had been piling up for generations." Margaret nodded slowly. "He wasn't always what he became. I need you to know that. As a child, he wanted to be a firefighter. Save people, not what happened. What changed? I don't know. The job, the culture, fear. Maybe he was always capable of it and just needed permission. I've gone over it 1,000 times looking for the moment he became someone who could do what he did to you. There probably wasn't a moment. Just a series of small compromises that added up to something monstrous. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to make all of us vigilant about our own small compromises." They walked together for a while, an odd pair drawing curious looks. Finally, Margaret spoke again. "I'm starting a foundation, in Stephen's name, but not to honor him, to study him, to understand how officers become what he became, how to identify it early, how to intervene. Would you consider being involved? Amara stopped walking, genuinely surprised. You want me involved in something bearing your brother's name? I want the person he wronged to help ensure it never happens again. There's a poetry to that, don't you think, Stephen's legacy being the prevention of future Stephens? It was bold, maybe even offensive to some, but there was something powerful in the idea of transformation, of taking a name that had become synonymous with police brutality and turning it into something else. I'll think about it, Amara said. That's all I can ask. The next day brought news from Phoenix. Marcus Thompson was returning to school, walking the same route where he'd been shot. The entire Phoenix Police Department had requested to escort him not as guards, but as witnesses to resilience. Marcus, through his mother, had agreed on one condition: the quiet circle walked with him too. The video of that walk went global. A small black boy, still limping slightly, surrounded by police officers and community members, all walking together toward a school that had become a symbol of hope rather than horror. Officer Kim wasn't there he'd wanted to be, but recognized his presence would shift focus from Marcus's triumph to his own guilt. Instead, he watched from his apartment, writing another letter he'd never send, adding to the pile that had become his penance. Back in Northwind, the bridge program faced its first real crisis. One of the paired officers, Dennis Franklin, had been recorded at a bar drunk ranting about babysitting gangbangers and how the program was neutering real police work. His student partner, Jamal, had seen the video, felt betrayed, and wanted out. The program coordinators wanted to simply reassign both parties, sweep it under bureaucracy. But Maya and Lisa Park insisted on addressing it directly. They called a meeting of all program participants, made Franklin and Jamal sit facing each other, and facilitated what became a 3-hour session of brutal honesty. Franklin admitted he'd joined the program for the optics to look good for promotion. Jamal admitted he'd joined to gather evidence of police racism to prove they couldn't change. Both had entered with bad faith, and both had been exposed. So, what now? Lisa asked them. You can both quit, prove that cynicism wins. Or you can start over, this time with honesty. Franklin looked at Jamal, saw not a gangbanger, but a 17-year-old kid trying to navigate an impossible world. I've been a cop for 12 years. I've become everything I swore I wouldn't, but I don't know how to be different. Then let me teach you, Jamal said, surprising everyone, including himself. Not how to be a cop, but how to see us as human. And you teach me the same about you. They stayed in the program, their partnership becoming one of the strongest, built on acknowledgement of failure, rather than pretense of perfection. Amara watched all of this from a careful distance, involved, but not leading, present, but not prominent. She'd learned that symbols were most powerful when they didn't try to control what they symbolized. But control was about to become impossible. The call came at midnight on a Tuesday, 3 months after the garden's opening. Not from Williams or Rodriguez, but from the FBI. Ms. Cole, this is Special Agent Diana Foster. We've intercepted communications about a planned attack on the bridge program graduation ceremony. Multiple actors, heavily armed, ideologically motivated. We need to discuss protection protocols. The graduation ceremony was meant to be a celebration, the first cohort of bridge pairs completing their 6-month commitment. It was scheduled for that Saturday, expected to draw hundreds, maybe thousands. Who's behind it? A militia group that sees police reform as government weakness. They believe creating chaos will force a return to law and order. Your name features prominently in their communications. Of course it did. Amara had become a lightning rod for everyone's anger, fear, and hope. Cancel the ceremony, she said. That's being discussed. But Chief Williams and the program coordinators want to proceed with enhanced security. They say canceling would be letting terrorism win. And proceeding might let terrorism kill kids. Which is why we're calling you. Your word carries weight. If you say cancel, it likely gets canceled. If you say proceed, people will trust your judgment. It was an impossible decision, the kind that defined movements and destroyed leaders. Safety versus statement, fear versus defiance. I need to talk to the participants, the kids and officers in the program. It's their lives at risk. The emergency meeting was held at 3 a.m. in the high school gymnasium. 46 people, 23 pairs gathered in bleary confusion that turned to sharp attention when the threat was explained. "So we're targets," Carlos said, matter-of-fact rather than frightened. "You've always been targets," Officer Morrison replied. "Now someone's just being explicit about it." "The question," Amara said, "is what we do about it. Cancel and stay safe but give them victory, or proceed and risk everything." "Everything's already at risk," Maya said. "My grandmother lived through the civil rights movement. She said they never canceled a march because of death threats. If they had, nothing would have changed." "Some of those marchers died," an officer pointed out. "And we remember them. We honor them. Their deaths meant something because they didn't let fear stop them." Lisa Park, still bearing scars from her beating, spoke up. "I've already been attacked for trying to change things. It didn't stop me. But I was alone then. This time, we'd all be together." "Together makes us a bigger target," someone said. "Together makes us harder to break," someone else countered. The debate continued until dawn, when exhaustion and emotion had stripped away everything but core truths. Finally, Jamal stood up. "My little brother looks up to Officer Franklin now. Not because he's a cop, but because he admitted he was wrong and tried to be better. If we cancel, what does that teach my brother? That trying to change only works when it's safe. That ain't real." Franklin stood beside him. "The kid's right. I've hidden behind safety my whole career, used it as an excuse to not engage, not change, not risk anything. If these partnerships mean anything, they mean standing together when it's dangerous." The vote was unanimous. The ceremony would proceed. The FBI wasn't happy, but they mobilized everything they had. The ceremony was moved to a more defensible location. Security protocols were enhanced, and every attendee was warned of the risk. Some stayed home. Most didn't. Saturday arrived gray and humid, the sky threatening rain that wouldn't come. Amara stood at the entrance watching people arrive, families, officials, media, and citizens who just wanted to witness something other than tragedy. Williams approached wearing full dress uniform for the first time since the station shooting. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know that what you started has changed everything. Not fixed, but changed. That matters. What I started was just a walk, Chief. No, it was a refusal to be diminished. That's what spread. That's what threatens them enough to plan this attack." The ceremony began without incident. Each pair was called forward to receive certificates that meant nothing officially, but everything personally. Morrison and Carlos demonstrated a complicated handshake they'd developed, making the crowd laugh. Lisa and Maya presented their podcast statistics. 2 million downloads, conversations started in places neither had heard of. Franklin and Jamal took the stage together, and Franklin did something unexpected. He removed his badge, handed it to Jamal. "This badge failed you before I ever met you," Franklin said into the microphone. It represented oppression, not protection. But working with Jamal, I've learned it can represent something else. So I'm giving it to him, not to make him a cop, but to remind both of us that authority is borrowed from the community, not imposed on it. Jamal held the badge, then handed it back. "I don't want your badge, Officer Franklin. I want you to wear it differently. That's harder than giving it up." The crowd was on its feet applauding when the first shot rang out.